British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will face no further action from police over Partygate. The Metropolitan Police announced it's issued 126 fixed penalty notices in its investigation into gatherings at Downing Street when COVID restrictions were in force. It says that investigation is now complete. Well, the police found events held at each of 8 dates it looked into involved a criminal offence. They include the Prime Minister's own birthday party back in June 2020. George Eustace is a minister in Boris Johnson's cabinet.
Well, obviously there's been a very thorough investigation and rightly so, because of course those of us who set rules get additional scrutiny. That's always understood, and some of these parties should not have happened, and the Prime Minister acknowledged that. He's apologised for that. He paid the fixed penalty for the one event that he was at. Others will pay theirs as well. There were failings, and we acknowledge that. We acknowledge the anger that some people will feel, and people should now pay the fixed penalties that they've got.
Altogether, 83 people received fines. 28 of those received more than one fine, with at least one person receiving as many as 5. The Prime Minister attended many of the events but was only fined once. Adam Wagner is a barrister and an expert in COVID law.
We do know that the police gave out fixed penalty notices for 6 gatherings the Prime Minister attended, and one of which, the birthday party, he got a fixed penalty notice for. One of which, the bring your own booze party, he was in his own garden, so I've always said I didn't think he would get a fixed penalty notice for that. And the other 4, I think, were all leaving parties. And it may be that the Prime Minister argued that he had a reasonable excuse because he only attended to give a speech, he raised a glass, and then he left, and that was part of his working day. It's what he does as the Prime Minister. Maybe that's why they decided they couldn't be sure that he committed an offence, whereas perhaps other people who stayed into the night and drank, they could be sure that that wasn't reasonably necessary for work.
But the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says that he still wants to see the Prime Minister resign.
My view of the Prime Minister hasn't changed. Of course, after an investigation that shows 120 plus breaches of the law in Downing Street, of course he should resign. He's responsible for the culture.
Well, the investigation took the Metropolitan Police 4 months, with officers working through hundreds of documents and photos. The force described the work as painstaking and thorough.
We've had a full-time team of 12 detectives working on this investigation. That's been supported by other people as the need has arisen. And we've also had a group of people who've carried out the assessments, and they've joined the full-time team as and when was necessary. All of that, the costs of those officers and staff and the overtime costs have totalled £460,000.
Well, Boris Johnson's spokesperson said the Prime Minister is pleased that the investigation has finished, but its overall findings are unlikely to please many. Let's go back to the barrister, Adam Wagner.
It's worth just stepping back and saying there were 8 illegal gatherings at Downing Street over the course of 2020 to 2021. All those gatherings, I guess, would be fairly defined as parties, which Downing Street has always denied there were any parties. It's difficult to see how they were anything but if the police gave out criminal penalties in respect of them. And it's worth asking how that happened, how that pattern of behaviour was allowed to happen, why there seems to have been a sort of lackadaisical approach to the rules that these people were themselves creating during the pandemic.
Well, a lackadaisical approach to the rules may have been proven in Boris Johnson's Downing Street, but by avoiding further fines himself, the Prime Minister has won round at least one former critic. Back in February, the Conservative backbencher Charles Walker said that he would applaud if Boris Johnson resigned. Today, however, he's told Newsnight, "I just felt his position was unrecoverable. I was wrong." So, the moment of highest danger does seem to have passed for the Prime Minister. Kitty Donaldson covers Westminster for Bloomberg.
MPs were angry. They might get angry still, but I think, on balance, probably the Prime Minister has ridden this out. It's been dripping on for so long now, 6 months or so, maybe more. And I think the Prime Minister, by refusing to go when he was at the most acute pressure, I think the decision was made then, and he has written it out. And of course, the water's been muddied somewhat by the fact that Durham police are now looking into Keir Starmer as well over the so-called Beergate allegations. I don't think also in the Conservative Party there doesn't seem to be the sort of groundswell of rebellion. There are pockets of people, you see them all the time, sort of talking in corners, wondering whether the Prime Minister is the right man for the job. But on Partygate, I think things are probably going to draw to a close.
But the Prime Minister is not out of the woods yet. Parliament's Privileges Committee is investigating whether Boris Johnson lied to Parliament over the affair, and their work could potentially unearth photos that the police used as evidence. More immediately, the final report by senior civil servant Sue Gray, which was held back while the police investigated, can now be released. So it could see the Prime Minister under pressure again. Well, Jill Rutter is a former senior civil servant in Downing Street.
We know Sue is updating her report, potentially for publication next week, that she did talk in her redacted report, the report we got at the end of January, about failures of leadership and a culture taking hold in Downing Street that both didn't particularly think the rules applied there, but also was, if you like, rather impervious to the attitudes in the rest of the country. So I do think that's the next critical step in this, is to see what Sue Gray really says and to what extent she holds the political leadership in Downing Street in number 10, which stops with the Prime Minister, and the civil service leadership, to what extent she holds them responsible for allowing that culture to take hold.
Well, let's cross over live to Westminster. David Wallace-Lockhart joins us, and we'll talk about Sue Gray's report in just a moment. But I just want to focus in on the fine for the Prime Minister. It was for a birthday party, not for any of the events that arguably could have been much more damaging to him. For example, the Bring Your Own Booze party in the number 10 garden.
That's right. And of course, that was an event he actually apologised in the House of Commons for attending. He stressed that he felt it was within the rules. But one part of this that raised some eyebrows is that we do know people who attended that event have been fined. But as you said, the Prime Minister is not one of them. Now, I don't think we could accuse the Metropolitan Police of not being quite forensic in all of this. They had 12 officers working on the case, and almost £500,000 spent in getting to the bottom of these parties at Downing Street. But I think there will be a sigh of relief in Downing Street that the Prime Minister only got that one fine. However, for plenty of people, one fine for the Prime Minister is one fine too many. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer saying that it shows there was law breaking going on in Downing Street on an industrial scale, when we know the SNP and the Lib Dems still calling for the Prime Minister to go.
And it's not just a sigh of relief for the Prime Minister, also his wife too.
Yeah, that's right. Carrie Johnson only getting one fine. The Chancellor, of course, Rishi Sunak as well, only getting one fine. And Simon Case, who is the country's highest ranking civil servant, who was at one point tasked with doing a report into all of this until it emerged that he may be connected to some of the events. He wasn't fined either. So I certainly think it's been quite a sorry saga for those people at the top of government. But there was perhaps points where there was a lot of speculation that Boris Johnson could be walking away with multiple fines, as could people close to him. And the fact that that doesn't seem to have come to pass, I think people in Downing Street will be quite happy about. And even with the whole inquiry concluding today, there hasn't been a groundswell of Conservative MPs, for example, saying Boris Johnson has to go. So right now, as of today, still quite safe in his position as Prime Minister.
David, as always, thanks for talking us through all of that. David Wallace-Lockhart live from Westminster. Thank you.